The questioning of an ex-police officer on his Chinese travels sparks controversy in Taiwan.
In the run-up to Taiwan's consequential presidential elections, Chinese military aggression towards the island nation is changing.
How Taiwan could go dark? The clue lies deep under the sea. Plus, as Tsai Ing-wen prepares to sashay away, which of Taiwan's candidates will be here to stay? Drag queens in Taipei take to the political stage. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Ika Vat. Taiwan's Defense Ministry has apologized for sending a nationwide alert warning in English of a Chinese missile fired over Taiwan.
但是简讯的英文用语因为疏忽没有同步更新原系统用字，精准的表达发射物是卫星而不是飞弹。国防部向社会大众致歉。
People across Taiwan were surprised by the alert, which said in Mandarin that the object was a satellite, contradicting the English message. China later announced it had launched a research probe on board a Long March rocket. Chinese rockets have passed over Taiwan before, but it's the first time the government has sent out an alert. Taiwan's main opposition party is accusing the government of using a national security law to persecute ordinary citizens. As John Van Trieste reports, it's a case that's highlighting both threats to Taiwan's sovereignty and civil liberty concerns.
Retired police officer Liu is at the center of Taiwan's newest political storm. Like many Taiwanese people, he has Chinese ancestry, and in October, he went to China in search of his roots. But despite many Taiwanese having Chinese heritage, Taiwan-China ties today are deeply strained. China claims Taiwan as its territory and regularly threatens to invade. Prosecutors say that while in China, Liu broke a national security law that aims to protect Taiwan from more subtle Chinese interference. It's known that Liu met with an official from China's Taiwan Affairs Office and called for peace with China in a group chat. But it's not clear how prosecutors think he broke the law. They haven't brought any charges. But they've called him in for questioning anyway, sparking concerns his civil liberties are being violated.
我就觉得这无形中不知道有什么力量还是什么在牵引着。我说我从年轻当兵当警察做了35年，你给我这反渗透法，真的对我很大的伤害。我说这传出去，人家会认为我叛国一样。
Taiwan's main opposition party, the Kuomintang, says the case is political. It wants warmer ties with China, and it's accusing the ruling Democratic Progressive Party of abusing its power.
检警调，大家都是公务人员。 我们不要为特定的政党在当他的打手。
The Democratic Progressive Party sees things differently.
基本上，我相信检调在调查的过程当中，其实就是要厘清。可是如果连厘清都觉得要出来抗议，那这不是心里有鬼是有什么？
Liu's situation isn't isolated. There are 100 active cases of suspected Chinese interference involving 206 people. But Liu hasn't been charged or even clearly accused. And his case highlights the difficult balance Taiwan is trying to strike between protecting its sovereignty and the principles it prides itself on, like due process and the presumption of innocence. James Lin and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
For a deeper look at the Anti-Infiltration Act and its use, John Van Trieste spoke to political risk analyst Ross Feingold.
So it's still unclear what prosecutors think this retired police officer, Liu Jiasheng, may have done to break the law, but it has something to do with a law called the Anti-Infiltration Act. Can you give us an overview of what's in this law and what sorts of crimes it covers?
The Anti-Infiltration Act was passed in the final weeks of 2019, just days before the January 2020 presidential and legislative election, and it seeks to criminalize taking instructions or funding from hostile foreign forces, which of course means China, and using the funding or following the instructions to influence the presidential or other types of elections in Taiwan.
Now, the Kuomintang, the main opposition party here in Taiwan, has characterized this as the ruling party, the government, abusing its power and to persecute ordinary citizens. What do you make of that? Is that a valid point?
I think there's some legitimacy to that concern because although the Anti-Infiltration Act is meant to criminalize infiltrating Taiwan on behalf of hostile foreign forces, what has happened in some of these cases or alleged cases is you have a person who maybe accepted a free trip to China or was wined and dined by Chinese officials, government officials, or front organization officials, but it actually in reality has zero impact on elections in Taiwan. So sometimes there's a gap between what the law intended to criminalize and the way it's actually used.
Although the retired police officer's actions or alleged actions may not impact the election, this is an issue now, and there is an election in just a few days. Do you see this having any sort of impact in terms of motivating voters to vote one way or the other?
Probably not. And the reason is there's so much going on and so much campaigning or attempts to persuade voters to vote for one side or the other that I don't think this particular incident is going to rank too highly, keeping in mind that we're just 5 days away from the election. I think voters are mostly looking at personal economic issues, issues of honesty versus corruption, and of course, China policy.
Once again, that was political risk analyst Ross Feingold discussing Taiwan's Anti-Infiltration Act and its enforcement. As Taiwan heads to the polls, Beijing's grey zone warfare tactics are changing. Rick Liao meets a military enthusiast with front row seats to China's war of attrition.
For the last 3 years, military enthusiast John Zhang has been coming to this Air Force base near his home in northwestern Taiwan to watch the planes. He then posts his videos online, aiming to counter Chinese disinformation about Taiwan's armed forces.
中国大陆那边一直在洗脑我们国军很弱，我们国军不强，他们很强。那我就觉得，我想要以我自己的力量，拍一个觉得我们国军也是很厉害的影片，记录他们的这些一切，来告诉国人说，我们国军也是不好惹的，也是很厉害的。
Spreading disinformation about Taiwan's military is part of China's campaign against the country that it claims as part of its sovereign territory. Separated only by a narrow strait, China regularly sends military boats and planes towards the self-ruled island nation as a form of intimidation. This is one of Taiwan's largest Air Force bases, and it's also one of the closest to China. It's from here that the armed forces scramble its jets to confront Chinese planes encroaching on the area around the island nation. This sort of sustained military activity is taking its toll on Taiwan's armed forces. It uses up fuel, wears down military equipment, and keeps pilots on their toes. But with days to go before national elections here, the number of Chinese military planes approaching Taiwanese airspace has decreased. Instead, the Defense Ministry here has reported an influx of balloons from China flying around and over Taiwan, more than 20 in just 1 month.
Historically, when China has attempted to do voter intimidation outright using military forces, Taiwanese voters have tended to go the opposite way that China wanted them to. So I think with these balloons, what they're accomplishing is kind of blurring the line between overt military pressure and more kind of regular civilian activities, if you want to call it that, by sending these balloons.
China's changing grey zone tactics like this can create uncertainty and confusion in Taiwan. And Zhang says it's up to citizens like him to counter that by keeping the public informed.
国防部一个人的力量怎么够？一定不够的啊！一定要透过我们民众的力量。
Taiwan's government has warned its people to be extra vigilant in the run-up to the vote as China looks to interfere with the elections. For plane watcher Zhang, keeping a keen eye on the country's military is not merely a hobby, but part of his civic and democratic duty. Sam Hui, John Su and Rick Lowett for TaiwanPlus.
To find out more about the influx of balloons from China around and over Taiwan, Rick Lowett spoke to William Kim of security think tank Rand Corporation.
So we now know that more than 20 balloons have flown over or around Taiwan. Can you tell us a bit about them?
Yeah, so there's a number of ways they can be used. I mean, one potential use is just using them the way you would use weather balloons collecting atmospheric data. This is something that the Chinese would be interested in terms of for things like missile attacks. It's not clear exactly what these specific balloons might be. I mean, a lot of this is speculation. I mean, it's possible that they're just sending them just to be a nuisance kind of thing, just to kind of be particularly given the upcoming election. It wouldn't surprise me if they're just doing it kind of for the sake of doing it. They may not necessarily have a lot of fancy instruments or anything like that, but assuming they are also trying to get some sort of utility out of them, again, similar to meteorological balloons, they could be collecting data on atmospheric conditions around Taiwan.
Do they pose a danger to Taiwan? What risks are there involved?
Looking at the information that's being putting out in the daily reports, I mean, they're saying, just today, they're saying in many cases below 30,000 feet, or in some cases below 20,000 feet. So they might be at like 16,000 feet. That's very low for for one of these compared to where balloons can go. So, if you think of the cruising altitude of plane you're flying on, maybe 35,000 feet. These balloons are flying at an altitude where there is some risk in terms of a collision or something like that.
Do these balloons put Taiwan in an awkward position? Is the military obliged to shoot them down if they're over the island?
I think the risk of starting a conflict or anything if they were to shoot them down is relatively low. I mean, it's certainly not the same thing as if you were shooting down an aircraft that had pilots on it. At the same time, there's also a risk that this starts to become a cost-imposing issue for the Taiwanese military, where if they expend missiles that cost $500,000 or $1 million on balloons that may cost a small fraction of that, then it becomes then there's a risk that the Chinese just kind of use that so that the Taiwanese military starts running out of missiles.
That was Rick Liao speaking to William Kim of the Rand Corporation. President Tsai Ing-wen has announced a plan to develop advanced fighter jets in Taiwan. It's part of her government's plan to continue strengthening Taiwan's defense capabilities. Tsai also says the country's production of Brave Eagle trainer jets will be complete by 2026. Industry insiders say ongoing fighter jet development is key to keeping talent in Taiwan.
永鹰高教机预计在2026年，也就是115年的整个量产会结束。那这个时候，如果说还不能够有相关的案子延续的话，对整个国内的相关航空产业会造成整个停滞。这个时候，人才的流失就会再次发生。
When it comes to defending Taiwan from a possible Chinese invasion, most of the focus is on traditional arms like fighter jets, tanks and ammunition. But another scenario could see the island completely cut off from the rest of the world. Joyce Zhang reports on the deep sea cables that could be used to take the country down.
A complete breakdown of critical infrastructure. That's what a dreaded 0 hour could look like for Taiwan if Beijing were to act on its threat to invade the country. Under growing Chinese military and political pressure, Taiwan's been boosting its military defenses. But according to the Deputy Digital Affairs Minister, the worst possibility wouldn't be a missile attack or troops storming Taiwan's beaches, but the severing of critical communication lines.
其实我们现在就已经在推演最糟糕的情况，就是我们的海底电缆整个被断掉，我们连网络都没得用。台湾是一个海岛嘛，那所以台湾所有的对外联络通讯，基本上以现在的技术还是以海底电缆为主。
Just 14 underwater communication cables link Taiwan to the outside world, which connect at 4 points on the main island. Damaging these connections could send Taiwan into a comms blackout, completely cut off from other countries. Speaking with TaiwanPlus, Global Networks Manager William Zhangjian from the telecom company manning most of these cables said he's concerned because the lines running to East and Southeast Asia effectively work as a cluster.
因为它一断的话，通常都是断的啦，不会说我东南的断了，东北的还留着。
And since 80% of these lines are in the South China Sea, they're vulnerable to Chinese attack. but Zhang says a lifeline could be the cables running out into the Pacific Ocean towards the U.S.
泛太平洋的海缆要被中断，其实有点难度，我是觉得比较高一点，因为它所在的范围其实都是在美国的保护之下。
Still, Taiwan going dark is a serious risk that would upend the lives of millions in the country. Taipei only has a handful of official diplomatic allies, and few countries have said explicitly that they would help defend Taiwan. But some analysts say shutting off Taiwan's comms might compel major world powers to offer different aid.
It's definitely easier than providing defense equipment or defense assistance because, in terms of communications blackout or something that affects the citizens more directly and is a little less controversial than giving defense equipment to Taiwan.
Taiwan's been working on building backup tech like satellites to mitigate the possibility of going dark, keeping the country connected to the world even in a worst-case scenario. Andy Xue and Joyce Sun for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up, migrant workers face long hours and low pay, but employers say they aren't satisfied either. Find out why after the break.
For more stories from here in Taiwan and around the world, please sure to check out our website at TaiwanPlus.com. Good shot.
Taiwan is voting for a future after President Tsai Ing-wen. TaiwanPlus has reporters on the ground.
We'll bring you a reaction as the results roll in.
The whole world is watching. We've got you covered.
Join us on election night for our live special, Taiwan Votes, only on TaiwanPlus.
Welcome back. You're watching Taiwan Plus News. Employers say language problems and disappearing workers are their key concerns when it comes to hiring migrant workers. But migrant workers advocates say the government needs to give them more support. Tiffany Wong reports.
Migrant workers in Taiwan don't have it easy. A recent survey by the government found that they worked an average of 48 hours per week for a salary of $1,000 a month. But it also found that employers had their own concerns when hiring migrant workers.
困扰的这个原因呢，最主要是语言不通，这原因是发生行踪不明失联情形。第三个是沟通困难。
Most migrant workers come from Southeast Asia and lack access to Mandarin language training. This can add a strain to their jobs and even cause them to quit without giving formal notice, leaving employers with the responsibility of paying off their debts.
那现在案件非常多，公司现在也在针对户头开户完之后的离境要做结清的动作。
Workers' rights groups say that the root cause of poor job retention is the government's lack of support, causing migrant workers to fall victim to a private broker system or suffer abuse by their employers.
So many institutional conventions mention about the government should take responsibility to guarantee the workers cross-border have to have safety channel, including not to be exploited financially or physically or psychologically by the broker or employer.
The government recently launched a streamlined service for existing foreign employees, but advocates say more needs to be done to ensure migrant workers' rights and safety. Klein Wang and Tiffany Wong for TaiwanPlus.
A court has found Taiwanese airline EVA Air guilty of violating staff labor rights. The Taoyuan Flight Attendants Union had taken the company to court for forcing pregnant cabin crew to accept a pay cut when they are transferred to ground staff. The Taoyuan courts ruled in favor of the union and have told EVA to compensate affected staff.
当然呼吁长荣航空日后不要再做这个违法的行为，应该要配合国家的政策，尽到它的社会责任。
Military drills by North and South Korea in the last few days have left South Korean border residents feeling fearful and vulnerable as hostility between the rivals heats up. Rosie Greninger has the story.
On the front line, the residents of Yongpyeon Island in South Korea are living in fear as tensions between the North and South bubble over. The South Korean military is on high alert here after North Korea fired more than 200 artillery rounds just days ago near their disputed border. The South responded with their own drills, causing Yongpyong residents to panic.
제일 가까이 있고 제일 쉬운 데라고 난 생각을 해요. 제일 또 요지고 그래서 제일 불안한 게 연평도 주민들이라고 생각을 해요.
Located 12 kilometers south off North Korea's coastline, Yongpyong Island sits just below the demilitarized zone separating the two countries in the Yellow Sea. Residents here evacuated to shelters, bringing back harrowing memories of when the island was shelled by North Korea in 2010. That in response to a South Korean live fire drill near the sea border. 4 South Koreans were killed in the incident, including 2 soldiers and 2 civilians. As far as the North is concerned, they just respond to provocation.
대한민국 군부 깡패들의 군사 행동에 대한 우리 군대의 당연한 대응 행동 조치라고도 할 수 있다.
After needing to seek shelter here with 250 others, Yongpyong community leader Kim Jong-lee is worried the island is not prepared for escalated conflict with North Korea. He raised residents' concerns to the South Korean military about the lack of clear communication and the need for supplies.
점심도 못 드시고 오신 분들, 어린애들, 그런 분들한테 해줄 수 있는 사항이 하나도 없었어요. 그러니까 짧은 시간이라면 괜찮은데 그래도 한 4시간 동안 돼버리니까 진짜 저희도 주민들한테 좀 미안한 생각도 들었고 이렇게 해서는 앞으로는 안 되겠다 그런 생각이 들었어요.
But with tensions again escalating between the two Koreas, residents here may need to seek shelter from shelling more frequently, as life on this frontline island could become a nightmare. Dolphin Chen and Rosie Greninger for TaiwanPlus.
Indonesia is temporarily grounding 3 passenger planes over door safety concerns. Lion Air's Boeing 737 jets are the same model as the Alaska Airlines plane whose door flew off mid-flight last week, putting passengers at risk. The Indonesian emergency exit doors are different, but the country's transport ministry says the jets won't fly until further notice. The US is heading back to the moon.
And liftoff of the first United Launch Alliance Vulcan rocket.
This rocket is shooting to make the first moon landing by the US in over half a century. If successful, the Vulcan robotic lander, built by a private company, would also be the first ever non-government lunar landing. The last time the US soft landed on the moon was in 1972. 4 drag queens have put on an election-themed performance in Taipei. The show is designed to make light of the politicians and their campaigns. But there's a serious message underlying it all, as Reese As now reports.
Is Taiwan ready for a drag queen president? This audience seems to think so. At an underground venue in Taipei, drag queens take to the stage as political candidates and lay out their policies. No, these queens aren't really running for office. They're parodying what they see as the farcical nature of election campaigning in Taiwan.
Election culture in Taiwan is basically a huge drag show. There's so many different aspects. First of all, there's always big trucks blasting out music, telling you that you should vote for them. Everything is so extra. So I wanted to play with it because drag queens are just absurd, and then politics are also absurd.
But behind the wigs and makeup is a serious message for voters.
It's so important, actually, not just this election, any chance you have to vote, you go out and use your vote.
Drag has long been an art form of protest and parody, and drag performers often find themselves at the forefront of rights movements. Originally from the US, Elia Heights, known out of drag as Ellery, has been living in Taiwan for over a decade. Elia has seen several elections and referendums come and go, and has seen firsthand how democratic participation from the LGBTQ+ community can have real effects on policy.
I've been in Taiwan for 11 years, so a few elections, local ones, and the presidential elections. I've been to a few rallies, been to a few protests, and seen a lot. And was here for same-sex marriage being passed, which was a really, really exciting time. A lot of people in the gay community were super involved in helping make that happen.
Voter turnout in Taiwan is usually high, with some presidential elections pulling in more than 80%. And as one of Taiwan's most divisive elections draws nearer, these drag performers want to make sure their community continues to make a difference and heads to the polls.
We want it if you can vote. All of you, go vote.
Leon Lien and Rhys for TaiwanPlus.
A radish picking event in central Taiwan has been a resounding success, attracting more than 5,000 people. A farmers' association in Changhua County organised the event, letting people pick as many white radishes as they wanted for free. But there was hardly enough to go around. Over 30,000 white radishes, around 3 tons worth, were completely gone in 7 minutes. The organisers say they'll do it again next year in a bigger field with more radishes. Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Finally today, we leave you with images of the International Kite Festival in Western India. I'm Ekavat. Take care. See you next time.